an MBA degree, and he has a PhD degree as well. So that's why I said that ये बड़ी multi-dimensional शख्सियत है, और इनकी जो एक personal interest that is in mental well-being, on stress reduction, how can the workplace be better places, और ये वो एरिया है जिसपे कि इनको जो हमारी ट्रेनिंग एकेडमीज हैं, प्रोफेशनल ट्रेनिंग एकेडमीज, सिविल सर्विस एकेडमी या नीपा, वहाँ पे इनको जो है अपने पीयर्स को उस पर बातचीत करने के लिए बुलाया जाता है. This time while he was visiting Pakistan, and I came to knew that he would be arriving, तो मैंने इनसे रिक्वेस्ट की कि थोड़ा सा टाइम जो है हमें STPI टीम मेंबर्स के लिए और जो ब्रॉडर ऑडियंस यहाँ पे मौजूद हैं उनके लिए दें, ताकि ये जो वेलबीइंग एट वर्क प्लेस है, जो स्ट्रेस मैनेजमेंट है, विच हैज़ बिकम एन एक्सट्रीमली इम्पॉर्टेंट part and parcel of our professional lives, तो उस पर बात करने के लिए मैंने एम्बेसडर साहब से रिक्वेस्ट की थी. थैंक यू वेरी मच सर आप के तशरीफ लाने का, एंड द फ्लोर इज़ योर्स. सो जो हमारा फॉर्मेट यूजुअली होता है वो ये है कि हम तकरीबन आपका 1.5 घंटे के इस इंट्रैक्शन में यू कैन टेक 40-45 अपनी टॉक में, एंड देन वी विल हैव interactive discussion and question answers. So over to you.
It's a pleasure to be here. Dr. Saab ने जैसे बात की कि I have a little interest in this particular subject, and that started from the anecdotal it was an anecdotal interest that we are seeing in our workplace. We are seeing people who are otherwise very capable, but they are not able to handle the pressures of the job, or they're not able to maintain their own well-being, and that has affected their performance, the productivity, and eventually the organizations. We will talk about that in a little way later also, how this has been more highlighted after COVID. So that was my interest. I have a background in medicine. Then in Liverpool University, we did a randomized. I was a student of Liverpool University, part-time student, and we did a randomized control trial at the Civil Services Academy. We developed and culturally adapted a multi-component psychosocial intervention, which was a series of workshops which were embedded into the training program. And that is something which I've been doing after that also in a few places. I personally feel that that is, apart from my day job, obviously that is something which is interesting, and we have a very sort of vibrant job. But this is something which I feel very strongly about, and I think that if I can contribute to that, and having an opportunity to talk about this among people like you who are day in, day out involved in research on different subjects, and who have a holistic perspective, I'm very grateful to Dr. Slattery for giving me this opportunity. And I hope that I will be able to learn something from you also, and from the audience which is online watching this talk, and we will be able to develop something which is in the interest of our people as well as our country. So I will. So we start with who is operating this?
Yes.
Acha ji. So we start with the Sustainable Development Goals, which is the bread and butter of this organization. You can see that the relevant ones for this purpose are number 3 and number 8, if I'm not wrong, if I can see it correctly. And this is also a part of decent work. It's part of your health agenda, it's part of your well-being agenda, but it's also part of decent work. There are different terms they use for it: decent work, good work. Well-being is defined in different ways, but basically it's a state of being comfortable, healthy, or happy. Well-being is also known as wellness. It's also known as prudential value, prosperity, or quality of life. And it is objectively something which is intrinsically valuable relative to someone. So a lot of the questionnaires and a lot of the outputs that we use in studies of well-being are basically self-reported. So the well-being of a person is what is ultimately good for this person and what is in the self-interest of this person. The self-reporting part is interesting for future research. That's why I mentioned that. Why is well-being important? Now, it's my original work is on psychological well-being, but it's a combination of physical, mental, emotional, and social health factors. And it's important because of the cost of dealing with individual loss of well-being for the organizations. I'm talking from the management point of view now. It's important because it results if you don't have a workforce which is well, it results in loss of productivity, loss of performance, loss of effectiveness, and that the different organizations which I worked with, there is a lot of understanding about that. Where the gaps are, I would also talk about that later. So one is for the individual and for the society, the healthcare burden, but also for the business organizations and for the government organizations, it's a loss of productivity and loss of good performance, I would say. Some of the figures from Deloitte did a millennial survey in which they said that young people in particular are struggling with 48% of Gen Z and 44% of millennials report that they are feeling stressed most or all of the time. And again, it's self-reported. These rising figures, they are coupled with the costs associated with loss of productivity. And that's why currently, and particularly after COVID, this has become an issue of interest, not just for people who are working in health and psychology, but also people who are working in management and in business field. Yes, this one is, there are some more figures which I, so basically, then how important it is. For example, now for Gen Z, it's the top consideration to have work-life balance in an unemployment, in a job which they are doing. And 60% of millennials say that they'd accept less pay if the work-life balance is better in a job. And this, again, this is why it's important for businesses also, because of the attrition which is happening and the cost of retraining the workers. The people are just signing off their jobs. Because of that, there is a greater interest. So I always give this example that if you just go through the cover stories of Harvard Business Review for the last 12 months, you will see that at least half of them have, in one way or the other, how managers can take care of the well-being of their employees, how to prevent burnout, what is burnout, all these subjects. They, at least in 6 of the issues, you'll see that these would be the titles. This is from a book which is Why Are We Here? If you get time, you could see that it's got a very philosophical, very, I would say, existential title, but it's also about the purpose of work. And the reason why I took this was that the U curve. So a lot of times when we talk about happiness at work and when we talk about well-being, uh, how it affects the different segments of the workforce. There is a study on it's Whitehall studies. There's a series of studies from the 1970s going on in the British civil service. And in that, they have one of the conclusions was that the psychosocial well-being of people at lower ranks is uh, worse than that of people who are in relatively leadership positions. And this is a sort of antithesis to the general view that we have that people more responsibility, they have more pressures and more stress. And secondly, also, you can see from this slide also that there is a turf, but there is a dip. But then generally people who are in their middle ages, they are showing more, there is a happiness is a U curve. So it's and that there are reasons for that, which if you want, I can point out some. Then we have this, yes. Okay. So these are some figures from COVID-19, and you can see that in all the major economies, China, UK, United States, for which we have figures, there is a rise in depression and mental illness. Burnout is a phenomenon. It's not classified as a disease, but it's classified as an occupational phenomena according to the International Classification of Diseases, which is how psychologists define different diseases. It's not a medical condition as such, but it is defined as factors influencing health status or contact with health services, which include reasons for which people contact health services, but they are not illnesses or health conditions. So just below, and something which is heavily impacting management. So the interest stems from there. It's a syndrome which is conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace, and it has feelings of energy depletion, increased sense from one's job. Are two words which are used a lot in management: presenteeism and absenteeism. Absenteeism means that people just walk away from their job, and presenteeism means that they are there but they are not there, and that is so that results in reduced professional efficiency. Some of the psychosocial risks at work. I think this is the place where I would like to talk about the demand control paradigm, which explains workplace stress. There are other theories, also theoretical models, but I think this model is very important in the context of what I've been saying earlier also. At a junior level, you might not have as high a demand as in the managerial level, but you have less control. So the combination of high demand and low control is what causes workplace, which is a recipe for workplace distress. So that's something which is interesting to keep in mind. If as a manager you are giving your employees a certain degree of autonomy or a certain degree of feeling of participation in the organization, that by changing that, because we'll talk a lot of how we deal with it at an individual level, and most of the work that I've done right now has been as a psychologist, as a how to deal with these issues at an individual level, and those workshops were for that. But there is another aspect, is how do organizations deal with it, and for that we need to restructure the work, and we need to restructure the content of the work. We need to restructure the style of work that we have now. We need to re-educate our line managers in how they manage their workforce in a way which enhances productivity and which looks after their well-being. I'm part of a British network, which includes many CEOs, and they talk a lot about these issues. This CEO was of John Lewis was made a presentation in the last meeting, and he said that the issue of attrition and the discussion focused on when line managers are promoted, we usually consider their competence, their professional competence, and how good they are at their job. So if somebody is a very good worker, he might not be a good manager because he might not have the emotional intelligence which is needed to become a manager. So that discussion, that should we consider to when we are promoting somebody, or we are even the organization, how the organization is taking care of the well-being of its workforce, should that be part of the agenda of the board of governors? And these are the kind of discussions that we have, and I think these are some things which we can think about, and we will, which I think are a subject of future discussions and research. Part of the interest, WHO has issued guidelines on mental health at workplace couple of years ago, I think in 24, probably just last year, and they have all the interventions they have suggested are also at the individual level, at the managerial level, and at the government level also, which is they are sort of general guidelines, but they are I think an interesting development. One thing which I like to show a lot is what are the responsibilities of lawyers for the well-being. I'm not going to read that out, but this is issued by the World Psychiatric Association. So it's when we talk about well-being, or we talk about these issues, one of the gaps which is there is, and which I think we are moving towards addressing that gap, and we should move to address that gap, is that when psychologists or researchers talk about interventions which can address well-being, or which can address mental health at workplace, they talk in a different manner, and when managers talk about it, they talk in a different manner. And there is a report also, I think 22 or 23 in 2023 by Wellcome Trust, which is a major funder of research projects. They have talked about how there is a lot of understanding in the managers and in the sort of business professionals about the need to keep this on their agenda, but a lot of things they are doing are not evidence-based. So this gap between the different disciplines, between psychology, between management, between psychiatrists, this is something which I think needs to be looked at. And while we need to have evidence-based, we also need to have culturally adapted. We need to have something which is closer to us. We'll talk about that in a while also. So, as I said, cultural adaptation, there are two aspects of any intervention when we are developing. I have had the opportunity to slightly modify and develop interventions for different sectors in Pakistan, the civil service, some business groups, some other government employees. And I think the important thing is we need to consider not just our own culture as Pakistanis and as Muslims, but also we need to consider the culture of the organization. And a lot of stigma is around these things, and that is in the West also. The other thing which is unique in our part of the world, there are several things, but one very important thing is that when you talk about physical health, for example, if I have a headache or if I have a physical illness, I will go to a doctor. But if I have a pareshani, या वो मखमसा है या some, so I will sort of do something else, which is otherworldly. I'll go to a peer, I'll go to uh, do something else, something which is not, which, a perfectly scientific person who uses medicine for other purposes would rather go to a spiritual healer and that division in our minds is interesting, because we don't treat mental illnesses like physical illnesses. The second thing is also we expect the doctors to give you medicines, and a lot of times, medicines are not the solution. But having been a doctor in my earlier reincarnation, I think there is this, especially in the developing countries, the kind of pressures that doctors face and the kind of training they have, they are inclined, and the patients are also inclined, that they should go for a pharmacological solution rather than a psychological or a talk-based solution. And that they would, even when we do it in the training settings, they would say, okay, no, this is not going to work. These are chemical things. You have to address them chemically. But they are chemical. There might be a stage where you have to do that, but there is our experience shows, and the general evidence in all over the world shows that it can be addressed through talk therapy, through other interventions, through some of the interventions which I'll talk about, which we have also been developing. And inherently, like other parts of our academic disciplines, these mental health interventions, these psychological interventions, they are developed in the West without consideration for the cultural nuances in our or any other part of the world. I wouldn't say in our part of the world, even any other part of the world. And there is now the balance between evidence and cultural adaptation. So while you need to have an evidence-based solution, which is scientific, and by scientific means, the scientific inquiry means that the same result should be applicable to different populations. And that is the basis of evidence, the evidence that we collect, and the theoretical basis of our scientific discussions. But cultural adaptation as a concept says that you cannot have a one size fit all, and you have to consider, for example, and in this there is actually a report by Asian Development Bank. It doesn't talk that much about cultural adaptation, but it mentions that the kind of tools that are in the Asian cultures for wellness, which are there from centuries and which are related to what evidence is finding to be useful. Even mindfulness, for example, was coming from the Buddhist philosophies. We have done some work in which we identified how the Sufi thought can lead to a better, clearer mind and a clearer, a more well individual. Okay, so I have another 20 minutes, right? Okay, now I'll talk about the interventions, which, as I mentioned, the randomized controlled trial. I'll start with that. We conducted these we didn't have a full trial after that, but this was the full trial that we had. And there are several elements of this particular intervention, which I think I would like to highlight. First is that it was built, it's a multi-component intervention. So by multi-component, as you will see later on, we mean that we have taken elements of cognitive behavioral therapy, we've taken elements of adaptive leadership, we've taken elements of problem-solving techniques, we've taken some psycho-education methods, and we've sort of developed something which is unique, which is short, and which is deliverable in a training setting as well as in a workplace setting. Then it is transdiagnostic. By transdiagnostic, we mean that we conduct these interventions, which we usually call workshops, without consideration whether the individual has been diagnosed with anything. most of the time there is no diagnosis. Most of the time, all of the time, there is no diagnosis. These are people who are working in the community or people who are getting routine training. So and I think that there is a debate on that. Whenever we do that, sometimes educated people also ask that, why are you giving this intervention to, or why are you giving this workshop to everybody? I think there is a value to that. The first value is that if you start diagnosing before you deliver any intervention, that would mean that there is a certain stigma attached to this. And if you point out that, okay, now out of this group, I'm only going to give it to these 3, 4 people, because in the previous questionnaire, we found out that they've got very high scores on PHQ-9 or whatever questionnaire we take it into account. So if we do that, there will be a lot of stigma attached to this one. So this resistance to embedding it would be a lot. And the second reason is that which leads to the group element also, that instead of doing an individual sort of intervention, which, for example, the main one of the major stream of thought between all psychological interventions is cognitive behavioral therapy, and cognitive behavioral therapy has certain elements which does not make it very useful for our purposes. One, and I know this, a lot of my colleagues in CBT don't like to hear that, but one, it's a long process. 2, you need to diagnose before that. 3, there is homework involved, which people wouldn't do. Usually wouldn't do. Okay, let me be a little bit, kind to them. And then it's an individual thing. So you have already pointed out somebody, or somebody has come to you. That's a different scenario. We cannot do that. We would like to do it in a community setting, because in a country like Pakistan, where you have 600 to 700 psychiatrists, psychologists, you cannot afford to deliver this. Even in Western societies with huge budgets on health, they are not able to invest heavily on this aspect, because just the nature is that it takes a lot of effort and time. So because of that, we think that this is the delivery methods also. For example, instead of calling it an intervention, or instead of calling it sessions, which sounds very sort of therapeutic, we call them workshops. By workshops, it's easier to, it's in the training, environment. It's easy to embed them. People are more willing to listen to you. And the delivery, if it is done by peers or by, for example, senior civil servants or senior judges, or at least they are part of the team, that gives a lot of comfort level, and that also multiplies your outreach. And by that, I mean that you train trainers, and so these are very, try to keep them as simple as possible. These trainers who are trained by master trainers, they can then keep this process. And what we would like to see happening is that this becomes sort of something embedded in the culture. Cultural adaptation, I've already talked about that. And also in the format is basically, in these workshops, we did psychoeducation, which means that we did a sort of a lecture, followed by breakout sessions in which individual discussions were happening, and in which the trainers were not heavily involved. We explicitly instructed them that you should ask the questions. And this is difficult also in a Pakistani training institute. I'm, talking for the last half an hour, people expect that if somebody is coming, if a resource person is coming, or a professor is coming, or a teacher is coming, he should be the one doing the speaking. And what I find is more effective is if we use sort of a Socratic method, that the individual, and that's also part of the CBT culture also, that we ask the you must have seen in movies also, they ask that, okay, what was your problem, how did you feel about it, and these kind of things. But this will not be acceptable if you're paying a psychologist like 5,000 rupees. You don't want to answer his or her questions, you want them to answer questions for you. Similarly, if you have a resource person, you expect that he or she should do the talking. This is not this is part of our culture. But then in the breakout sessions, we intentionally structured them in a way that there was, and then the final session, we did some reflection. Everybody came together and they shared what they had discussed in the discussion. The idea was, this is a GI Joe fallacy, which is relatively, there are many fallacies, but this is a relatively new one, I think started in the 80s or 90s from Yale University. G.I. Joe, in the end of every episode, it's a cartoon character from 80s. Most of the people won't know. I think there are very few people who were kids in 80s, but here, maybe Slurry Saab and me. Okay. So G.I. Joe used to say that knowing is half the battle. And that's a fallacy. Doing is the battle. People know a lot about these techniques which we are talking about. Usually there is nothing new in them. Especially for educated people, they already know, okay, there is something called mindfulness. There is breathing techniques, these problem-solving techniques. But the challenge is, how do you embed them into the culture of an organization and into the habits of an individual? So that's why we do this several times. That was the idea. This is one of the a sort of a positive feedback cycle which one of my colleagues created for another study, and which I like to use a lot also. Problems create stress, and stress reduces your ability to deal with problems, which result in further problems. So this is the mushkilat ka ghan chakar. These are the questions, actually. I'm not really going to answer these questions, but these are the questions which we ask in the workshops. We ask them, what do you think is stress? How does it affect you? How do you find out if you have stress? And just a comment on that, in our culture, when somebody talks about stress, they will usually talk about it in terms of the physical impact of stress. The symptoms will be physical. The symptoms will not be mental symptoms. So that makes it a challenge also. And then people, so like, for example, in Potwar, where, in Rawalpindi, Islamabad, there is a common symptom which ladies, housewives say that, gas ka gola utha or hit my head. Mere sir nu chad di gas. This is actually, it's a psychological symptom, but they cannot put it in psychological terms for whatever reason, for cultural reasons. So we have that. So yeah, this is also, how do we identify depression? We usually do that as a part of our workshop, because we feel that these workshops, one is that they can address cases which are not, I mean, people who have some issues, they can find out these issues and they can get some help, but also they provide a pathway. So if somebody has a serious issue and they are not able to address, they find out that, okay, I have a serious issue and I cannot address it through these workshops, they will go towards the next step, which is going for talk therapy, individual psychologist, or going towards medicinal treatment. So yeah, these are the discussions, how adversity causes stress, how stress affects the body. And then we introduce a basic strategy. We introduce deep breathing. It's the easiest and the simplest one. And there is whenever we do these sort of exercises, there is a reluctance saying that, oh yeah, I know about a lot of other techniques which are much more sophisticated, and why don't we use them? I think the reason for not using them is this is the one which is the simplest. if you cannot embed this into your habit system, then probably the ones which are more complicated, you won't be able to do them. The second is that it is the one which we can easily teach within the framework of our workshops. Uh, and the third is that probably some of the techniques like mindfulness, uh, you won't be able to do it in workplace also, given the environment. So this is something which takes like 5 to 10 seconds, and this is something which. And again, the point is that knowing is not the battle. So it's the doing is the battle. Okay. The second skill which we work on during the workshops is managing problems. Again, here we use the simplest techniques. A lot of people that we work with, judges, civil servants, business professionals, they have some management training, so they are using problem-solving techniques for other issues. But what we encourage them is to use them for their issues which are affecting their life and living. And there we start with defining what is the problem, what is the need. Uh, Two types of problems, solvable, unsolvable. The solvable we are going to look in this workshop in the skill 2. Then unsolvable we are not going to touch, and that you have to be very careful, because people immediately will start talking about unsolvable problems, which probably Larry Saab can solve and I can't. Like, why is there high inflation? Why are the prices going up? And why is there chaos in the world economy and all that? But these are not part of the workshops that we are doing. We try to focus on simple things like, okay, I'm not getting enough sleep, I'm not getting enough time for exercise, I have a disturbed work-life balance, and these are the things which within the time frame and within at the individual level we can address. There are obviously other things which can be addressed at the organizational level, but we try to keep the focus here on the individual one. Uh, Build a problem tree. Do we have a problem tree? Again, these sort of cycles you are interested, you would already be aware of how you observe the problem, how you interpret it, and how you intervene it. And when whatever is left, you observe it again and you interpret it again. And you then this cycle is used for a lot of, within management, but we use it here also in the problem tree analysis, which again, is relatively simple one. The causes are hidden. The problem you can see, but the causes are hidden and the consequences are visible. The consequences are the branches and the causes are the roots. And so we have a full session on this. And then when you identify, and these, I mean, I'm also telling about my workshops, but I hope that some of these things would interest some of you, and you can probably maybe use them for some benefit. So when we have any problem, you identify what are the causes. For example, I am not getting enough exercise. What could be the causes? My time management is poor. I have too heavy workload, which is taking my concentration away. Uh, and the consequences are, of course, no time for the family, no time to do my work thoroughly. My cholesterol is going high, my blood pressure is rising. All these are the consequences. But what are the root causes? Maybe your time management is poor. You are not able to have a effective communication with co-workers or bosses. So all these things. The simplest way to explain this is that you turn the problem tree upside down and you address the causes, you will address the problem and the consequences. So it's this I like to say, this is my tip, turn it upside down. Okay. So, and from that, from the discussions between the individuals, we develop an action plan that how they are going to do it. Again, the same techniques we use, a list of possible solutions, select the solution, discuss their pros and cons, and then think about all the resources you need to execute it, and then prepare an action plan. So it's primarily uh, all these things which we use in decision making and management. These we are trying to uh, address our well-being issues through these techniques. The third one is keep going, keep doing. And this has been translated into Urdu as chalte rahiye, karte rahiye, kuch karte rahiye, something. But the basic concept is, and this is again from psychological evidence-based methodologies, basic interventions. Basically, when you have stress, then you stop doing things which, for example, you have a lot of workload, you will you like to listen to music, but you said, okay, no, I'm not going to listen to music and I'm going to do my work. But actually, it's counterproductive because if you stop doing what you like, then it reduces your ability to perform your job. And that is a part of behavioral activation also and in this, the link between the previous skill is that if there is something which you can implement the action plan, that is successfully executed and you're fine. If there are some which you are not successful to execute, so you go to plan B, and there are some which you are unable to do, or there are issues which I mentioned before, unsolvable issues for the purposes of our discussion, and those you will go for behavioral activation. You will address them in a behavioral way. Okay, so yeah, I think I've talked about this. This is basically the same thing which I was talking about. We ask them to list activities you enjoy and then try to focus and give some time to those activities at least. The fourth skill is strengthening social networks, which is very important. And I think in a society like ours, which is a developing society and which has a lot of flux, not just economically we are changing, but we are changing as a society also. Three generations are rarely living together. We had a social support system, which now because of a variety of reasons. I wouldn't say that it's because of the decline of moral values. It's also because, for example, if both husband and wife are working, then there is nobody to full-time stay home and take care of the elderly, or for the kids, that matter. So you have to find a social support system. In that, there are different kind of social supports: your colleagues, your seniors, your professionals, your family, your friends, your governments, your organizations. And this is, again, we are talking about in terms of workplace. How do you strengthen them? There is one thing which I'll say about this, because in the interest of time, there are different types of social support: emotional, instrumental, informational, appraisal. And all these don't have to come from the same source. This is, I think, a key thing which needs to be understood. For example, if you have a peer or you have a colleague, you can discuss some of your problems with him or her. But because your colleague is also a competitor and is in the same profession, you might not want to discuss that. There would be certain things you can discuss with family. There would be certain things you can discuss with friends who are not in the same profession. So we have to evaluate, and this kind of thinking has to be behind this, that what is it exactly that we can share with whom, and then but you need a social support system. This fallacy that I am strong enough to deal with everything, I don't think that's helpful. Why people don't share? Because they don't share because they don't want, out of kindness, they don't want to burden others. They said, okay, I'm suffering, why should other people suffer? The second major reason is we see that if we ask for support, it's a sign of weakness. It is also, you are exposing yourself to somebody, and there is a difficulty of trusting somebody else. So all these are there, and we have to keep them in mind. These should not stop us from seeking social support. For example, one thing which we thought is that, okay, when we were doing psycho education, we thought that, okay, let's share these on a WhatsApp group. And my view is that probably it's okay if the organization or the trainer shares it on a broadcast, but if you put it on a group, then maybe not a good idea. Yes, this is the overall view. staying calm, looking forward. That's taking care of your life and career. Uh, some of the ideas that we talk about, and these again, these ideas are coming from some are coming from CBT, some are coming from ACT. You will, I mean, you can recommend easily. We talk about peace, which is corners job satisfaction, problem management, and good health. So I'll just skip through these so that we can have some discussion. This is a major source of anxiety these days, the fear of becoming obsolete. And this is there is a study, I think, which says that probably it's the uh, happiness, Gillette happiness, I think, survey. It says that 1 in 2 workers globally are experiencing AI anxiety, that we are going to become obsolete. And one thing which one point which I'd like to mention here for especially for professionals like you is that there are generally in layman terms, some people say that you should push ahead with stress. Some people say that you should withdraw, you should give up and go take a break, or both of them are not the final solutions. But one thing which a lot of people have found has been very effective is learning. Learning can be a big de-stressor. Any kind of learning, whether you're learning a language or you're learning something else, that can help you in keeping yourself. And particularly if you're anxious about AI, then maybe one way to go about it is embrace it and try to learn more about it and make yourself develop those skills which will still be needed despite AI becoming what AI is. Yeah, I've talked about possible difficulties. Sleep deprivation, we talk a lot about. So we have this as a part of my slides, which I'm not going to talk about. Tips also. Yeah, this I would like to request you. This is a QR code towards a questionnaire, which I'm not going to ask you to give a feedback on how the workshop was or how the discussion was. That I think Sulari Saab will ask you to do. There is a short questionnaire about workplace stress, and this is a sort of a survey and study that we are doing in different. We are obviously it's an anonymous survey. The publications will not include anybody's name or any pointer towards the identity. But this is a very short survey about workplace stress and how we identify whether people are having this kind of stress and whether it is damaging them. And 7-8 questions. And then if you are interested in becoming part of any future study on this, I think this is somewhere where we have a lot of research gap, we have a lot of understanding gap, but we have a lot of implementation gap also. Even when there is an understanding, people don't really know what to do about it. And I would like to while we do this work at an individual level, I would also like to do work, which I have been doing some work with some organizations at an organizational level. As I said right in the beginning, that it's very important that governments should have a framework, organizations should have a framework, because this idea is 1960s that if I'm a good manager, I'll create stress in the organization so that people are able to deliver more. There has to be a balance. Stress is not inherently bad, but consistent, persistent stress can lead to loss of productivity. That's what evidence tells us. And I think we should learn from science, and we should be able to create an environment in which the workforce is more productive and efficient. And thank you very much for your time. And I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ambassador Saab, especially for condensing 3 days workshop in less than an hour and giving us some sort of outline. I was in discussion with Ambassador Saab that next time when he comes, if he can give the full workshop with STPI team. But first we wanted to gauge the appetite for it and interest for it of course, talking of emotional well-being, emotional health becomes irrelevant if it is done under stress and under some executive order. That's why we thought to give you a taster it involves. Then we Ambassador Saab that in his next visit to Islamabad, if he has time, then he can arrange this workshop. But we have about 35 minutes with us, half an hour. So the floor is open for question, feedback, your queries, anything. We can collect 3-4 questions and then I'll ask Ambassador Saab to inform.
I have
Ji.
my friend coming here all the way from UK, Shahzada Hayat, a barrister.
Welcome. Ji, Tahir and Ali Jabir.
Yes.
I've heard from some leading doctors like Bashar and Saeed Minaz. Some of these diseases are contagious.
We can take.
I mean, there are different. I'm sorry. I mean, Farid Saab and Mubashir Saab both are teachers. I was educated in Rawalpindi Medical College, and sir, 13th, I think, 1391. So, but they are psychiatrists. You have to. So we psychiatry is inherently, psychiatrists are trained towards a pharmacological solution. And these things, one thing which I can say from confidence is that there is not one determinant. So if you say that these are part of your genetics, you can't do anything about it. They're part of your chemical makeup, or they're the part of the way you are raised up and there is nothing you can do to address them now. That fatalistic viewpoint, I don't really take that. But I do, I mean, they're not contagious in the sense of an infection, but they're in that sense that if somebody has depression, he's liable to give that depression to the people around them. That in that way it is. So maybe contagious, they used it in that sense. So if, for example, your boss has some problem, it is likely that he will transmit it to the whole organization. So that's why I'm talking about emotional intelligence for line managers. And I think that's why it's very important that when we put somebody in a managerial position or put somebody in a leadership position, we should also look at their emotional intelligence and their ability to not only look after themselves, but also to look after those people. Like, and I think for a Muslim, it's very easy to understand. वो जो है कि एक हदीस है कि all of you are चरवाहे हैं आप सब और you are responsible for those people who are put under you. So I think from that up we always realize that the leaders are responsible for the productivity and the performance of the organization, but they're also responsible for the well-being of their workforce. That is something which is a cultural thing which needs to, not just here, in the West also, it needs to change.
Thank you, His Excellency, for your insightful presentation and lecture. Sir, as a journalist by background and as a communications practitioner, my question is that, as you mentioned in your presentation, that many of the stress patients are asymptomatic, in simple terms, that there are no symptoms that we can diagnose directly. Sometimes in our routine, we try to make such practices just to gauge the ability of our team workers or just to push them to reach at a competent level. But these kind of interventions, they become counterproductive and they bring stress among our peers. How can we identify this kind of scenarios or make a diagnosis in our teamwork that my positive attitude is actually incurring a negative impact on ground? And how can I differentiate that either my colleague is in stress or not? So what interventions then we should do to sort of bring a situation to in a positive scenario where we can actually bring that particular individual out of stress? Your comments on that?
दो चीजें. I think I'll take one at a time. If you want, I can take three at a time. But okay. So what I think is इसमें दो चीजें. One is that stress inherently is not bad, and stress is not avoidable also. So in any jobs, particularly yours, there will be stress. What is bad is distress. Stress reaches at a level that you are becoming unproductive, and that obviously it has an individual. Everybody has a certain what we call psychological capital, and that psychological capital that helps you to develop your resilience, and you are able to deal with stressful situations in a better way. I don't think. I mean, it's inevitable, but I wouldn't advise anybody to unnecessarily put their workforce in stress. We do need to give them tools. And I think that's where the difference is, that instead of putting your workforce, testing their limits, you should give them the tools which they are able to address the stress in a better manner, and they don't get distressed. So in my opinion, we should look at it from this angle instead of the one that you mentioned. I'm talking in English because I thought you have got.
Thank you very much for giving me a chance to say something. I will speak one or two views in Urdu if you allowed me. I have worked in many departments as a law division senior researcher, registrar of companies, legal advisor, Razad government. जो बेसिकली जो आज के मसाइल हैं वो इंटॉलरेंस है. हर आदमी जो है वो कुफ्ते बर्दाश्त से बाहर हो गया. KFC में अटैक हुआ, उस बंदे को भी मार दिया. हमारे जो घरेलू मामलात हैं उसमें क्योंकि औरत कमज़ोर होती है और कमज़ोर पे ही इंसान गुस्सा करता है, और वो जो मर्द है वो बहुत ही ज़्यादा डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस होती है. उसके फिर बच्चे देख रहे होते हैं, वो फिर बच्चे जब जाएंगे वहाँ पे एम्प्लॉइज़ या दुनिया में किसी जगह पे भी, वो उसी की रिफ्लेक्शन होगी. मेरा व्यू ये है कि ये जितने मसाइल हैं बेसिकली तो इंटॉलरेंस है, बाकी सारी उसकी शाखें हैं. थोड़ा सा अगर इस्लामिक वे ऑफ लाइफ थोड़ी सी इंसान प्रैक्टिकली गुजारे तो इन मसलों का हल मौजूद है. मिसाल के तौर पर आप गुस्से में खाना खाएं, वो हज़म ही नहीं होगा. खुशी में खाएं, वो हज़म हो जाएगा. तो ज़हनी सेटिस्फेक्शन जो है वो ज़रूरी नहीं क्योंकि आदमी गरीब आदमी हो या कोई इस तरह की चीज़ें हों. मैं समझता हूँ कि अगर घरेलू लिहाज से मीडिया पे, क्योंकि कॉन्फ्रेंसें हर आदमी अटेंड नहीं कर सकता, ना सेमिनार अटेंड कर सकता है, मीडिया पे अगर इस तरह के कोई प्रोग्राम हो, हम घर की औरतें मर्द बच्चे देखें, तो मैं समझता हूँ कि इसमें बड़ी कुछ डेवलपमेंट हो सकती है. थैंक यू वेरी मच.
I think in general terms, दो चीजें, एक तो ये कि सॉफ्ट स्किल्स जो है वो डेवलप करने की जरूरत है. And what we focus a lot on hard skills and on professional competence, but soft skills at the same time. For example, as a medical student, there were two subjects which I would say pretty much neglected, and those are the two subjects which आप भी डॉक्टर तो नहीं? अच्छा. So what I find were, and all my colleagues would agree, that we find most useful in life. One is public health. How do you prevent things from happening rather than you deal with them when the disease has already happened? And the second is psychology. So how, when a patient walks into, whether you're a surgeon or how do you break the news to somebody? How do you deal with the family? That is a skill which the best surgeon, the best medical practitioner, everybody would need that. दूसरा जो आपने इस्लाम की बात किया, I think there is one thing which is coming into the lingo in academic circles in West a lot, kindness in management. इस पे काफी काम भी हुआ है. But what I've done a little bit of a study, and my view is कि ये जो kindness in management का जो concept है ना, इसको आप रसूल पाक सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम की जिंदगी में उनसे ज्यादा आपको कहीं नहीं नजर आएगा. चीजें भी ये है कि you forgive people, you tolerate them, इसी तरह रसूल पाक सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम हज़रत अली का आप देखें कि ही डिडंट वांट टू किल एन एनिमी, वो किसी दुश्मन को गिराया, उसने थूक दिया तो उन्होंने उसको
हमारे इतने बात
उसको उन्होंने कहा कि मैं अब आपको कत्ल नहीं कर सकता, इसलिए कि नाउ इट्स माय इमोशंस एंड बिफोर दैट इट वाज अ पर्पस दैट वी वर फाइटिंग फॉर। सो ये जो है ना, पर्पस को इमोशन से इलादा करना, मेरा ख्याल है कि जो मैनेजरियल जितनी हजरत अली का जो मालिक उश्तर को जो खत है, दैट इज सम प्रोबेबली किसी वक्त आप उसके ऊपर वी शुड डू सेशन ऑन दैट। इट टॉक्स अबाउट देन माज बिन जबल के को भी उन्होंने तो ये जो मैनेजरियल कॉन्सेप्ट है आवर एंड the managers, because I talk a lot, mostly I talk to managers and leaders and all that, not through workshop but also generally, तो वो लोग कहते हैं यार ये बातें सारी ठीक हैं, but if at the end of the day it's the performance, it's the bottom line which matters. In my opinion, the bottom line also gets better if you show kindness in management. And that is, I think, my opinion, which I agree with you. And then these
one thing,
like Kanaat.
excuse me, one
Ji.
thing I will add. I was also editor of yearbook. Every ministry is preparing activities. I have included that yearbook in Lord Vian, letter of the Malke Hazrat Ali alayhi salam का। उसमें मैंने बल्कि उसमें डाला है, और वो यकीन आपने बिल्कुल सही कहा। मैं कहता हूँ क्या जबरदस्त, बल्कि मैं समझता हूँ नेजुल बलागा है।
It should be part of the syllabus.
हाँ जी, तो वो
It should be
कुरान
part
के
of
बाद अगर मुसन्निद बातें आपको नजर आएंगी तो
जी।
मौला अली की नजर आएंगी।
हाँ।
थैंक यू वेरी मच।
Thank you.
बैरिस्टर हयात लंदन, प्रेसिडेंट UICF UK। मैं खाली आपसे ये कहना चाहता हूँ कि first of all I commend SDPI for bringing such a distinguished guest, and I tell you why I come from Britain to say you've invited such a distinguished guest, and it's an honor for me to come all the way from also UK to attend the overseas conference और इनकी बातें सुने। ज़हूर साहब जो हैं हमारे, he is one of the 5 international Pakistan के ambassador जो बुलाए गए हैं for overseas Pakistani community to interact with Pakistan here. Army chief वहाँ थे, Prime Minister, and why I've come especially here to listen to say how lucky and privileged we are, what a great person he is and why he's great. इनके पास है knowledge, experience, wisdom and tolerance. 4 चीजें बहुत important हैं आपके लिए, और above all courage, and he has also patience. वो सब चीजों से मिलाकर we have one ambassador here, and he's also been the High Commissioner. He's had both positions, ambassador and High Commissioner, in London, in China, and Europe, and back to Europe again. Though many times he's been offered higher positions, but he's declined so that he can stay in the embassies or high commissions to interact with public. So he believes in interacting with public is far better than interacting with just a few people. तो इनके लिए जो है
Thank you.
पाकिस्तान की, he is an amazing gentleman जो आज आपके पास आए हैं, और ऐसे लोगों की वजह से कायदे आजम ने कहा था, हम लोग जब यूके जाते हैं, there is no power on earth that can undo Pakistan. They are a bridge between us, the British Pakistanis, overseas Pakistanis, and Pakistan. और इन्होंने जो पाकिस्तान के लिए किया है, all his life has been dedicated to Pakistan. So I commend SDPI को इनको बुलाकर आपके सामने पेश कर दिया है. You have a man in your presence who is Pakistan's greatest asset and star. And we owe him a great debt to serve in our country. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Well, Siddharth, I think I'm very confident that I don't deserve all that praise. But what it shows is the love that you have as British Pakistani and as an overseas Pakistani for Pakistan and for your country. So very grateful to you. And we'll talk about
Questions, especially youngsters, अगर आप लोग कुछ ऐड करना चाहें. He spoke about Gen Z, he spoke about millennials. So
If you can help me with this, please do scan this QR code and send me some replies. It will be helpful in fine tuning this kind of work that we are doing. As I said, it's a research gap, but it's also an implementation gap. And I think STPI is in a very good position to link academia with policy. And that's why I'm honored to be able to speak here.
thank you. Please give round of applause. It's open to
Thank you so much.